to introduce yourself to the people?
Okay, so thank you, Megan. So I'm Sammy. I'm ex-software engineer, metaverse enthusiast, karaoke enthusiast, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Transak. And Transak is a developer integration that allows apps to onboard their users from fiat to crypto. And we work with over 100 different apps, including wallets, including games, including DeFi. And as we're going to talk about, we do quite a bit of stuff in Metaverse as well. So looking forward to discussing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have a really exciting announcement about a new Transac development that's happening in the metaverse. And I'll leave it to the panelists to share that with everyone. So quick audience check-in. Give us a thumbs up if you're an experienced Decentraland visitor, landowner, or investor. You consider the metaverse your second home. Give us a heart if you're new to the metaverse and you haven't been inside Decentraland yet, but you're curious. And give us a clap if you're somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we're seeing lots of varied responses. And it goes without saying that if you're new to the metaverse, that's okay. So we're billions of people around the world and we're just getting started. So you're in the right place and we're still very, very early. Okay, so let's kick off with just a roundtable set of questions. Well, just one question, really. My first question to all of the panelists is to define the metaverse in your own words, in a concise, in a as concise of a form as you can. Let's start with Sammy. How would you define the metaverse?
I would define the metaverse as I guess, an online environment in which you can, okay, I'm going to get philosophical. It's kind of an infinite game in which you can do many different things. I would also say that it involves aspects of being kind of run by the players in a decentralized way, being built by the community in a decentralized way, and potentially involving crypto and NFTs as well as decentralized kind of ownership of content as well.
I love that you included the decentralized component, which I think we all, if you're in Web3, if you're in crypto, we all kind of take that for granted and we just say, of course it's decentralized. But as more brands and companies are starting to gravitate towards the spatial web or the metaverse, that's a really important pillar, I think, to keep in mind. Let's hear from Sean. How would you describe the metaverse? What's your definition?
To keep it short, breaking down the word, an extension of an already existing reality that is given as much importance, if not more importance, than the reality it resides within, irrespective of the components that make it up. That is the primary definition.
Love that. Love that. I hope the audience is taking notes. Let's hear from Michael. What's your definition?
I would say it's a virtual space where commercial and social interactions take place, to keep it simply.
Yeah. And we'll dive into what this all means in more concrete ways. If you're listening and you're like, that's great, but what does that mean? We'll definitely get to that. Luca, what's your definition?
Awesome. I love being concise. So to me, the metaverse is simply a virtual economy that is self-governed and user-generated.
And user-generated. That was the last thing you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Super cool. Well, let's dive into kind of our main discussion of the day. We're going to talk about the way that I'm thinking about this conversation is in three parts. The first is an overview of the many different ways that you can make money in the metaverse. And then we'll go into part two, which is how to get started. And then part three, we'll talk about ways to scale. So whether you're interested in just doing this as a side hustle, or whether you're interested in bootstrapping, or even scaling to the point where you're seeking VC funding, we'll kind of talk about that towards the end. But let's just get started with a general overview. So I want to give Luca the opportunity to start here, because Luca, you're the multi-potentialite entrepreneur, bootstrapper embodied, right? So I know from talking to you that you're the kind of person who sees, I guess, gaps and sees where there's opportunity, and then you just make it happen, and you go towards it. So start, get grounding us in your story a little bit. How did you kind of get the idea to start Metaverse Architects? And then with your experience, like, give us an overview of kind of the areas that you see the biggest opportunity right now.
Okay, so I'm going to base my answer on a bit more of kind of entrepreneurial opportunities and how I like to think of it. I like to go surfing, and when I compare entrepreneurial opportunities to surfing, I think you can look at them pretty well. When you go out to surf, you've got to get past quite a few waves to get past the break, and that's kind of the moments when you're searching, when you're just putting your head down and paddling. Sometimes it feels like you're going nowhere, but you just got to kind of hold certain that you're going somewhere. That could take long. On different days, it could feel harder, depending how big the swell is. And then once you get past that break, that's a moment when you've got to start looking around, and start looking for that wave. The opportunity is the wave. Once you see it coming, that's when you've got to start paddling as harder than you ever had in your life. And hopefully when that wave comes underneath you, you do stand up at the right time, and you manage to take it all the way to the beach. So that's how I would sum up looking at opportunities. It was very similar for how things worked out for Metaverse Architects. I had just had the free time to basically be doing all of this research, because I had left my previous work. And it was only by kind of freeing up that time that I could actually do the work to research about the opportunities in blockchain at the time, at the start of 2021. And that's when I saw this combination of NFTs and a virtual world. And to me, that was something that was going to take a number of years to actually come to fruition. But then, of course, life always throws in a few unexpected factors. And in the case of Metaverse Tech, it was Facebook changing their name to Meta. So
oh my gosh,
that accelerated things faster than I could have imagined.
yeah, for sure. And I know that's another conversation in and of itself, because brands are moving to the metaverse with a lot of speed. So, okay, keeping it kind of concrete, Metaverse Architects, you are a developer, a land developer, and a modeling and game studio, right? So tell us like what that is, and maybe like why you chose that as like the first kind of opportunity to pursue in the metaverse.
So it was the company was started on an observation, and the observation in our case was that virtual land owners are made up of mostly investors, and just like investors who buy land in real life, you don't necessarily have the skills to actually go out and develop it, or the time to learn how to do it.
Yes.
So I assumed that the same landowners who spent a lot of money to acquire the land, possibly for their company or for their entrepreneurial idea, are going to need people who take the time and do enough research to actually figure out how to build on these platforms. And over the past nearly a year and a half now, we've basically focused on building the skills that allow us to turn people's property into a space where users of Decentraland want to go and want to spend time.
Yeah, I love that. So just taking that first kind of category of land ownership, just like in the physical world, you can develop it and turn that into a business. You can sit on it and let the land appreciate. It all kind of depends on what your desires are, what kind of cash flow you want, how much money you have or are willing to invest into it. But just taking that example, like talk about the skills that are required, and maybe we can kind of pivot to Michael here too, because Michael, I know your background is in land development and real estate. Like for somebody who's trying to translate physical skills into an entrepreneurial opportunity with metaverse land development, like talk about like maybe the team that you kind of have to assemble and what kind of skills are needed on that team. Who are you hiring to do this kind of stuff, or who are companies hiring to do this kind of stuff?
I mean, from a virtual architecture point of view, we hire 3D modelers, architects, and developers. From an investor's mindset, it is the same mindset that goes into investing in physical real estate. That is what I try to perceive to people. You have the capital investment, which is normally barren. So if you're going to buy something on the center and you're buying literally a plot, and then you have to come up with a concept to ensure that you have enough ROI to sustain this initial investment, right? And there are different ways, which we have many different clients who have different use cases, who build products to facilitate this growth. Give you some use cases. I mean, we've had clients from retail outlets to casinos to mental health clinics, you name it, basically, who all have a different source of income to ensure that they grow smoothly and that their customer base is also growing as well. That makes sense.
Mental health clinics in the metaverse, or are you talking about physical?
Mental health clinic. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very interesting concept, and it carries a lot of weight, and in the future will be definitely one of the leading spaces in the metaverse. It's a psychological clinic whereby people with different stigmas, etc., around the world can meet therapists who are a scarce resource, let's be honest, great therapists in one virtual space.
Wow. Okay. All right. So we're going to go down some rabbit holes during this conversation, but I promise I'm going to go take us down them, pull us back out, and then keep the conversation going. But when you hear something like mental health clinic in the metaverse, I mean, I have friends who are counselors and therapists, and I'm like, how do I get them excited and on board for something like that? What's the and any of the other panelists, like, feel free to chime in too, because we're getting into what life is going to be like in this new spatial reality where we are interacting and having these real authentic experiences in a digital space that benefit our life in the physical world as well. So like, let me think about how to not get too philosophical here. Like, how did that need come about? You know, if we're talking about entrepreneurship, when we're looking for needs that are unmet, like, how did that use case come about? And then how does the metaverse and virtual experience specifically meet that need or add value to people's lives in ways that aren't happening already in the physical world?
I mean, I would look at it quite economically. If there's demand over supply, then I think it fits the need. So if there are many people who want to join this health clinic, then there's a need for it, and then psychologists, etc., can branch out. I don't know if Sean wants to add up on this. I see him nodding.
On the edge of my seat. And then Megan's saying, let's not get too philosophical.
For those who are listening, Sean is our resident philosopher.
So the Minds Easy project we're working on, the first mental health clinic in the metaverse, we're planning to launch that by mid-Q4. And it's quite an exciting project. The reason why it is exciting is we're trying to tackle mental health first aid as a provision in a means in which we can provide accessibility to mental health first aid in a way which is dynamic for the specific user. And as Michael perfectly pointed out, there's two fronts towards this project. The first is destigmatization with regards to providing educational experiences regarding different mental health provisions and also ailments, and then obviously as well dealing with mental health first aid as the primary first provision, so the first exposure towards mental treatment in the field of mental health, which then would lead you towards a medical profession. What's exciting about these two spaces is we can use both audio and visual aspects to be able to help in both treating mental health first aid, but also in raising awareness on what it might be like to suffer from a specific mental health condition. For example, it's never been easier today to educate citizens around the world with regards to what schizophrenia might be like now, thanks to VR technology. Another great project we're working on is dementia and Alzheimer's, and trying to scope out from a physical perspective what it would feel like to slowly have the effects of forgetting and losing touch with regards to the familiarity of the things around you. Just one other thing that's really interesting in the provisions is breathing exercises with the dynamic movement of the architecture of the therapy room you're in and the changing of the music, the lights and whatnot. All of that is really interesting.
I love that. I mean, I just went to a salt cave a couple of months ago, and it was very much like that. Like they put headphones on us, they like played soft, soothing music, you know, and then we like listened to a guided meditation. And I'm like, that would be such a fun experience in the metaverse if it was happening in a more spatial way that felt more like immersive compared to just like putting a recording on my phone or something like that, or streaming a yoga class. But you're also talking about something deeper, which is like using VR technology to encourage empathy in people, like actually giving people the opportunity to experience what dementia might be like, or like you said, what schizophrenia might be like. Because if you're in an immersive world where the parameters of the world are different than your own reality, then you get the experience of what it's like to live in somebody else's reality, which is so beneficial. So if you're listening, I'm obviously passionate about mental health. So if you're listening, you know, and you're an architect and you're an investor, or if you have friends who are in the mental health field or who are doctors, care providers, physicians, like nobody is really excluded from, like nobody can really in any industry can say, oh, the metaverse, that doesn't apply to me. Like it literally applies to anybody in any industry or any field, which is great. Let's pivot to Sammy for a minute, because, and I want to keep talking about all the different ways and all the different opportunities that exist. But Sammy, where does money come into play in all of this? I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole of like insurance and medicine and the medical billing, but just like simply crypto on-ramp, right? Like we're moving into these spatial worlds, these immersive worlds. We need money to interact with people and to transact. So talk a little bit about where you see your role and Transact's role in this, because we are at the beginning.
I'm going to say my answer based on data. So Transak is the fiat on-ramp for Decentraland. So we can see like people buying mana and also in order to use Decentraland. And I did some research and I was kind of tracking like, what do people do after they buy the mana, right? Like you have to do something with that thing. And at the moment, it's mostly buying like an NFT. So that would either be like an in-game item, like, you know, you can have some like wings or you can have like a funny hat or something. So you can buy that for like a few mana. There are also some people who are buying land. Obviously land is a much bigger investment than like a funny hat or something like that. It costs a lot more money.
How much does it cost? Like, what's like the entry point? What's the barrier to entry for that, roughly?
I mean,
I know you're not an expert on this, and it changes every day. So
this is a little depressing topic for me because I bought some land a few months ago, and it was probably around like $20,000 a parcel or something like that, and now I don't know. It's like probably like a few $1,000s, something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's down a lot.
Which is crazy because a couple months ago I interviewed someone who bought a house in New Jersey and then bought a piece of land in the metaverse in Decentraland, and the Decentraland land like 100x, and meanwhile his house in New Jersey was like, you know, barely appreciated at all. But I'm sure that that's different now because the land value is so influenced by the broader crypto market, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it's a long-term investment. I'm sure you knew that going in.
Yeah. No. I'm happy to hodl.
But anyway,
in terms of other things that people are spending money on, I think that what the guys from Metaverse Architects is talking about is very interesting. Is that we're getting more kind of commercial use cases, like a clinic or like any kind of thing where you actually have to spend the money. Because if you walk around the metaverse now, there's not that much stuff that you can spend money on. There's like a lot of kind of buildings that have like stuff in them, but you can't actually like interact and spend money. There aren't that many like games yet. I think every week, every month, they're getting more thanks to a lot of these guys. But something that Transak is very keen on is also a product, Transak One, that we announced recently, and also helping to kind of put fiat directly into a product, because we want the metaverse to be something that can be used by normal people, right? If let's say you're going to a clinic for a mental health problem, or you're going to like play a game or something like that, you shouldn't be encumbered by like all these technical details of like what's an NFT, what's mana, what's like layer 1, layer 2, what's gas fees. So
Right.
we're enabling people to kind of pay fiat directly into a use case, whether that's playing a game or doing some kind of commercial good or buying some art or something like that. So that's kind of Transact's role is like simplifying the onboarding journey. We don't provide any products, we don't provide any things to do. That's the job of other people. We just help to onboard people into those things with their credit card or with their bank transfer.
Yeah, which is a great example of another entrepreneur opportunity that you saw, Sammy, because you were like, this world is being developed and it's the future, and there's got to be a way for people to easily transfer their money from fiat into crypto. And there will soon be a new way for people to do that in Decentraland. I know we're going to talk about the ATM that's being developed and is live currently and will be released formally next week. And we'll get the chance to tell everybody about the ATM very soon. But we have a really great audience question that I want to throw to the panelists. I'll let whoever feels called to jump in, answer this question. It's from Mark. Mark asks, how can you transfer ownership between the different platforms? Not only sell or swap the token or NFT, but also use the item with its unique properties on a different platform. So this is a question about interoperability. Oh my gosh, interoperability. Oh my gosh, interoperability. Meaning if I buy, an outfit or something in Decentraland, can I wear that outfit on another metaverse platform? Jump in.
Should I go first? You guys are like looking for the mute button, but
yeah, you want to go for it.
That's a really good question. That's one of the biggest things behind the growth of the actual sector. Interoperability is the seamless movement of both digital assets and players between multiple different virtual spaces. I think Sammy said it when he started with his metaverse definition, where he called it an infinite space. And that is the correct means towards looking at it. Decentraland itself, if you were to take a grounded theory approach towards defining it, it's a virtual world, maximum a virtual galaxy if you're dealing with instancing. But the metaverse as a concept is so much more than that. It's more than just a singular space. It's a network akin to the internet as a concept in that regard, where you need layers of democratization, decentralization, and equitability, and that being shared and verified across an entire network of space. To bring it back, one of the solutions we're looking at that could potentially solve this is IPSME, which is a means of translating information between different virtual worlds, different spaces, and also between different chains. But
what is it called? Can you repeat what it's called again?
IPSME. It's like a translator network between two different servers in a way, where the two servers will be able to communicate with each other. And as long as there's a translator between them, seamless movement could theoretically be done. The prototypes we've seen are done between Minecraft and Doom, which is basically a Java-based program with an Unreal Engine 3, I think, engine. Extremely interesting in that regard. And they also managed to achieve interoperability between digital assets in those games as well. Obviously, doing this on a scale where it can impact an entire sector like the metaverse, though, is a whole other story, and would probably require an infrastructure built by actual translators. But it's a very good question, and it's something I think one of the big challenges over the next 10 years for the development of the metaverse itself.
Yeah, so there you go.
I might add to it, actually, interoperability is really broad, and there's so many ways to tackle it. One thing that I found interesting that's came out kind of thing, or to my attention in the last week or two, has to do with developing open standards. How I've understood it is that when websites used to be developed in the 90s, before, not sure on the exact dates, HTML was not yet created. So anyone creating websites would not be using the same standard for actually coding out their website. And what HTML has is simple kind of functions like the bracket video or the bracket image that is widely kind of recognized by different browsers and different languages. So what I've seen happening that the other side, Meta, kind of spoke about, is that they are developing or trying to develop the HTML script for 3D objects in the metaverse. Now that would mean that if I 3D modeled a chair and I wanted to put a chair in the metaverse, I would only need to put in the script chair, open brackets chair, and attach it to the GLTF file. I think it would work something like that. And that would basically mean that that people would be able to do the simple functions, like for somebody to sit on a chair without actually learning how to code. At this point in time, to do any kind of animation or function or something that's a bit more complex, it requires you to be quite knowledgeable in code. And I think having more open standards that kind of embody these functions that are necessary are just going to be developed more and more over time.
Yeah, that's so important. And I'm hearing that this is another entrepreneurial opportunity. So people out there who have this skill set or who want to assemble a team, to kind of develop these solutions. Would you all say that that's another opportunity?
It's an opportunity, and it's also, I think, vital for the industry to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're listening and this is, something that you're passionate about or it's sparking your interest, go down that rabbit hole. We definitely need it. And I've also heard of different use cases talking about interoperability when it comes to search as well, even just like the ability to search like a Google that can index and crawl all of the different metaverse platforms that are out there. That's another area as well.
And what should that even look like, right?
What do you think?
So definitely, at the moment, I think it's quite difficult for people to actually find what to do and where to do it in the metaverse. And that's something that we started to work on with Metaverse Events, which was to create a place where we're bringing in, Metaverse events happening in Decentraland, in the sandbox, and across the different platforms. The biggest challenge with that is at the moment, Decentraland is the only platform out there that is really an open metaverse. Of course, there are others, but it's kind of, there isn't so much choice really at the moment.
Yeah. I remember when you and I met in person a couple months ago, you mentioned there needs to be a TripAdvisor for the different metaverse platforms that are out there.
For sure.
And that's just talking about events, let alone all of the other different services and experiences that it can soon offer. Okay, let's pivot a little bit into if you're a creator or an artist of some kind. We've talked about the tech side of things. We've talked about land. We've talked about care providers, mental health practitioners. Let's talk about artists who want to create things for the metaverse. There's digital art that's being made. There's digital wearables. What are the other opportunities that people who are visual artists or artistically inclined could get their hands on right now? Let's start with whoever wants to chime in.
I mentioned the fashion industry. I think the fashion industry is a really big use case, mainly because we've already seen how in the video game space, skins are a huge driver of revenue for virtual worlds that are Web2, you would say, and that are already popular. So we see that as already a growing industry in the Web3 space for the metaverse platforms like Decentraland. One thing I would mention that would make a fashion designer stand out if they decided to get into wearable work would be to actually not just stick to what they're strong at, which is the actual 3D design of those wearables, but to go and to experiment with attaching code and adding more functionality beyond the aesthetics. Because what's actually being really appreciated in this NFT space is marrying that beautiful aesthetic with utility. We've seen that popular in the NFT space with these generative art that make use of code to actually create their art, but we're not seeing so much of it yet when it comes to actually designing wearables. So, for example, with a smart wearable, you could go out there, and create some crazy items that do all kinds of different things. One thing that I've been telling my team we need to go and develop is a flamethrower, for example. I just think it would be really fun to develop a flamethrower, go to all of the events happening in the Central Land and create some disruption by shooting fire over the place.
He's not joking.
What?
And would the flamethrower actually, would it set stuff on fire?
Yeah, how does that work?
Well, I'm going to ask Sean if he'd be able to develop that for the company, but I don't think so.
Because I guess in that case, like whatever it's flamethrowing, the person who created that object would need to consensually create a function that allows it to be set on fire, right? There would need to be like consent from both sides.
Oh my gosh.
I'm imagining it is more of a kind of like just something you can see, not something that will have physical or virtual effects.
Tara says, it sounds like metaverse building insurance is needed. Tara, you're exactly right.
Especially when Luca's coming up with some of the ideas.
Right. If you see Luca,
yes.
Metaverse
I embody Schumpeter. Schumpeter always talks about creative destruction. So I think that's a good idea.
Well, but you're actually bringing up a really interesting point, which is that, and this is why, like, you bring up an interesting point, which is that the rules of our reality don't necessarily have to be the rules of the metaverse. So, like, if you come into, I don't know, a Snoop Dogg concert in Decentraland and you set off a flamethrower, are the rules of Decentraland going to be such that a flamethrower would automatically make whatever is around it catch on fire, or would it just be for fun? And like, these are things that the people who are building get to decide, but we don't have to abide by the laws of physics here, which is kind of what makes it exciting too for somebody like an architect. In fact, I was talking to somebody who knows an architect who is seeing the metaverse as the opportunity to build his like magnum opus, like the building that he has always wanted to create, but kind of got discouraged in the process of trying to build it in this world, because in this world you have to abide by fire code. So like every floor has to have a big ugly exit sign and a big stairwell that the purpose of the stairwell is just for the fire escape, but there's no like beauty attached to it. There's no aesthetic value of it other than like getting people out of the building as quickly as possible. But this architect said that he saw the metaverse as an opportunity to kind of bypass the rules of the physical reality in order to create this like art of his dream. Sean, what do you have to say about that?
Because I love what you just said, and you're so like right. And I just wanted to point out that it's not just about the gravitational or physics-based limitations, but it's also resources. That in the metaverse, it doesn't matter how much metal you're using or what resources you're using to build A. And primarily B, which is even more exciting in that regard, is that it opens so many doors for R&D processes to be able to just play around with different concepts in perpetuity without really worrying about how grandiose your ideas are, or how many resources you're using to ideate these different prototypes. And that can have exciting potential on a global front if anyone can have access to these tools and spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm seeing my team submit a poll or ask me to share a poll. So if you're listening and you're excited by all of this, when do you think the metaverse adoption will become mainstream? Do you think it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or never? Dun, dun, dun. What do the panelists think?
Sorry, let's let my Michael. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to start with Michael, Sammy, and then we'll let the other two jump in. What do you think?
Maybe I'm an optimist, but I say even less than 5 years.
Wow, it looks like Dell's agrees with you.
36 months to 5 years. It's not in the fully immersive version that was written in the books 20 years ago, but in the use of the consumer, yes, probably within 3 to 5 years, we'll have an active community.
I love that. Dell's, who is an audience member, also agrees with you. Del says 2 years, not the full version, but real life use cases.
Real life use cases is the perfect example.
Love that.
Right, because like kind of kicked off, and I would say that went somewhat mainstream, like in the last year, right? And you know, I had people talking to me who are like have nothing to do with crypto or anything like that. So all you need is like one really popular use case, you know, whether that's like metaverse concerts or metaverse mental health clinic or like some game or something like that. And then, you know, I think after you get that kind of mainstream adoption, you can title metaverse as mainstream, right? And there's no going back. You're only going to go forward from that.
I love that.
Great point. Something I'd like to add. I mean, for me, I think it's just a matter of the hardware catching up. Once the hardware catches up and is easily accessible and cheap enough for the man in the street. So Sean's holding up. Sean, can you show it again? Sean's holding up the Oculus, which is brilliant technology, but realistically, you won't spend more than an hour on it today. I don't know if the rest agree. Once the hardware catches up and exponential technology takes place, it will hit very quickly.
And now, are you saying like once it becomes, I guess, easier to wear and less kind of obtrusive?
Yes. It's kind of like how we used to carry those big Nokias in the early 2000s, and now suddenly 3 years later, people are taking selfies, or 5 years later. It was very quick, you know?
Yeah.
But everyone learned very quickly.
Yeah, I saw a Twitter thread the other day that showed like a portable laptop from the 80s or the 90s was like literally a big square that somebody put into a briefcase, and then they were like carrying around this big clunky briefcase. And now, of course, we have MacBook Airs that weigh nothing, and we can just slip them into a backpack or something like that. I love that. Okay, so let's take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Metaverse ETM, and then we'll go back to getting started and scaling, because I want to be mindful of time. So, Luca, do you want to share with everybody what's happening next week on August 2nd?
Yes. Let's give the people a bit more anticipation for what's happening next week on August 2nd, because I'm going to follow up with what you were talking about with, you know, the innovation adoption, so the adoption of this technology.
Perfect. We'll piggyback.
I'll try to go through it quickly so I don't keep you waiting too long. But firstly, when I talk about Metaverse, I usually use Decentraland as an example, mostly because Decentraland matches the literature on Metaverse platforms the most closely. And that has to do with its structure and with how it's been set up. Secondly, I like to remind people to have perspective. So it might feel like Decentraland and the Metaverse has been with us for a very long time, but not very long ago it was in the dark. Barely anyone had even heard of it. And when we look at things that came before Decentraland, something like Second Life was launched in 2003. Today, there's 64 million active users. Roblox launched in 2006. There's 37.1 million daily active users. Minecraft in 2011, and it's got 141 million daily active users. Let's remember that Decentraland went public in 2020. So it hasn't even been so long, right? Since it was open to the public.
Oh my gosh, how many?
And being a user-generated metaverse means that the content needs to come from the users. So this takes a bit of time. When we look at the people who are already inside of Decentraland, they're not normal people. Normal people don't have the patience to figure it out. It's true. The people inside Decentraland are early adopters. And again,
by the way, we mean abnormal in the best possible way, in the most complimentary way.
I'm sure that nobody would mind being called an early adopter, because at the end of the day, when we look at like the definition of an early adopter, this is again from literature on innovation adoption. Early adopters are people who are technology focused, proponents of revolutionary change, visionary users, and willing to take risks. And that sounds like the same people that I meet at a Crypto Wednesday or a Crypto Monday, whenever they're happening. Those are the kind of character traits of people in Web3.
Right.
So I think that most of the users today, they truly enjoy using something like Decentraland, because they understand where the technology is going, what potential it has, and they take either pride or enjoyment from being amongst those first, as well as wanting to actually contribute to take it forward. So to sum it all up, I think actually today, the average Decentraland user doesn't ask what Decentraland can do for them. but they actually ask what can they do for Decentraland.
Oh, I love that. Flipping the script a little bit. Well, speaking of, okay, so tell everybody what's happening next week.
Yeah, so next week is a project we've been working on for a while now to get together the first ATM for the metaverse. The whole concept there is that, when you're moving around the platform of Decentraland, if you come across something you like, for example, at the Metaverse Fashion Week, there's quite a number of steps for you to actually top up your MetaMask wallet with Mana. That's the cryptocurrency that's used to transact in the metaverse. So by setting up these metaverse ATMs across the Decentraland space, we're shortening the number of steps it takes for a user to go from having no funds in their wallet to having funds in their wallet. And thanks to obviously the technology that's been developed by Transak and has been proven for many, many years now, that's able to be done in a secure way and in quite a quick way as well. In the sense that you could just use your credit card or a bank transfer, and that is immediately exchanged or nearly immediately exchanged. Doesn't take much time at all into your Ethereum address.
Yeah. So next week on August 2nd, there will be, Luca is going to be hosting a 2-hour long, is it 2 hours or an hour and a half?
So essentially, when we meet
long
on the
Zoom.
2nd August, we're going to have another call that's going to be set up like this. And the intention is because I know that there's some people who might not have been in the Decentraland before, or some people who are not so familiar with it, as well as I think that it would be quite interesting to be on a call together whilst we get into the Decentraland, so we can speak, communicate, ask questions, give any comments, maybe actually have some feedback for how we can make it better in terms of the UI. And the whole point of setting up a call on the 2nd of August similar to this is so that we can go into Decentraland together and have a channel of communication open as well. Of course, if you're very familiar with Decentraland, you're free to actually visit the Airdrop Tower estate by going to airdroptower.com, and that takes you straight into the location where there's this Metaverse ATM. There's also some interesting gamification we set up. I'm not sure if we're going to tell you today or we should leave it as a surprise.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Are we allowed, Sammy? Are we allowed to tell them today, like what's happening with the event next week?
Maybe they just have to turn up, I think.
I don't know. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it up to Luca. It's fine by me. It's fine by me. It depends, like how you want to play.
Maybe we can give a hint. Maybe we can give a hint.
Maybe hints. Yeah, let's tease it.
It's not a flamethrower.
Oh. It's not a flamethrower, but if you've watched Back to the Future 2, there's something exciting there that I think we always have wanted as kids that you're going to have on the property.
Yes. So here's what to do. So you can go to airdroptower.com, and there you'll have an opportunity to jump into Decentraland. You can join as a guest, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners already have been in Decentraland and have a crypto wallet. I recommend linking your crypto wallet, setting up your avatar. I just did, and I actually fixed my hair to look like my avatar today. And once you're there, you'll be at Airdrop Tower, and you'll get to see the convention center where the Metaverse Architects team will be unveiling the Metaverse's first ATM, where you can just easily top off your crypto wallet the same way that you would at a physical ATM without having to go to a centralized exchange, for example, buy the crypto, send the crypto to your wallet, wait, however many minutes and sign multiple different transactions. You can just purchase the Mana right there. And the Metaverse Architect team has built a couple of surprise games that you can play and so you can bring your friends and just have fun and see what the metaverse is all about, see what Decentraland is all about, and again, experience the world's first metaverse ATM, which is unprecedented and super cool. So that's happening next week from, let me get my times. I think it's noon to 1 Eastern time, noon to 1:30 Eastern time. And there is a link in the chat right now. So if you're if you're interested in joining, just click on that Eventbrite link and you can register. You'll get all the information to join. Again, you can either join directly by going to Airdrop Tower, or you can register for the Zoom, and Luke will walk you through in the Zoom session how to do it, show you how to use all the features. And again, you can give your feedback and learn more that way. So there it is again. Let's go ahead and wrap up the conversation, although this is going to be an ongoing conversation, let's be honest. Just talking quickly about how to get started, and then kind of like how to think long term. If you have an entrepreneurial idea in the metaverse and you think maybe you want to develop it, what's the first place? Where's the first place to get started? Who would like to jump in about that?
I can. I would recommend, like, if you find Decentraland is great as a learning platform. It's an awesome place to start learning how to code, how to design different buildings. And one of the reasons for that is if you go to docs.decentraland.org, everything is laid out in the most clear of ways. So if you are interested in that regard and want to learn how to do it yourself, all the information is public and available on docs.decentraland.org. That's
dox.decentraland.org, or DOCS, like docs, like documents.
Docs, DOCS.
Okay. Just making sure, because, you know, there's so much lingo in the crypto world these days, and docs means something entirely different. So yeah, Sean is talking about the documents page. And if you're in the crypto world, you know that most companies have a documents page, because that is kind of the ethos of Web3, is making as much information open source and transparent as possible. So docs.decentraland.org. And what will people find there, Sean? One more time.
Everything from how to create content, to design experiences, to the builder, to how wearables work, the code behind them, the SDK, every single function in the SDK, all the utilities, 3D modeling, tutorials. I'm reading the list.
Amazing.
Examples, it's all there. Everything is available and open with regard, and it's all transparent. This is why we like Decentraland so much, because Lucas said it best when he said it's about what we can do for Decentraland at this point, because there's no centralized governing entity. It's a decentralized system where everyone contributes in their own way. And to do that, you need to educate the community on how they can use this technology to their advantage, and to also build spaces that are owned by them and used by them and built by them. It's quite
amazing.
Elegant in how it's set up.
It almost feels illegal to know that, because I think maybe I just have like Web2 PTSD or something like that. But I'm just like, wow, you can just get all the information right there and use it freely. Like,
and even
that feels wrong.
To answer your question, Megan, there's also then the DAO page, which would be DAO.decentraland.org, and that is where the community congregates together and uses their voting power to be able to pass different decisions based on how they would like to see Decentraland move forward or take decisions or not. So an example is the code of ethics of Decentraland that was made by the people, voted on by the people, and approved by the people. Decentraland currently, in this very moment, is spending $680,000 on grants that it's giving to people in Decentraland to be able to build different projects, different ideas, different entrepreneurial ideas, and tech-based projects for the community, and it's funded directly from the people. So if you actually have an idea, an entrepreneurial or any idea anyway related to Decentraland or the Metaverse, the first step would be to go on the docs and start getting an understanding of what is possible and what isn't, and what you can play with and what you can't. Once you start really refining that idea, you can legitimately go to dao.decentraland.org. You can apply for a grant, and you can get anywhere between $3,000 up to $240,000 based on the scope of your grant. And it will be general internet users that are approving the use of that funds to be able to give you that money to start it up, develop it, and test it out.
That's amazing. Is that how Metaverse Architects got started? Did you all use a grant?
No, I prefer the private sector by far. The DAO for me is like a government. It's very slow.
Well, there you have it. Honesty. Speaking of transparency. No, but this is good. I mean, because you have to know what your style is, right? Like, are you a boost driver?
In fact,
Are
that's
you
something, sorry to stop you, but it's a bit of a blanket statement I made there. But that's actually an advantage of something like Decentraland, that it does actually allow a private sector of independent entrepreneurs to come in and actually build whatever they're thinking of. So comparing the DAO to a government works in that comparison, because as we know, governments, because of their structure, does tend to be more bureaucratic.
Right. And
So
if you're listening and you're not sure what
it is, move fast. Obviously, DAO is not the fastest way to go.
And for those who aren't aware, DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, which is just like Sean described, a collective of users and a community of people who vote usually using governance tokens, but it's not the only way, on kind of like the values and the way that decisions will be made and all of the proceedings of that community. But you can also just wild west it as well, like Luca is saying. So it's important to kind of know what your personal preferences and what your style is. I can relate to that because as a freelance writer, I've never been a writer that applied for grants. I was always like, let me just figure out how to be entrepreneurial about it, because the grants always took too long. But I know lots of people who've written books that they did with the help of grants. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. Sammy, I want to ask you a question actually. Because you I know that you partnered with Metaverse Architects. As someone who has a product in crypto, a crypto product, when it came time for you to decide who to partner with to develop this digital ATM, what influenced your decision, and what factors were you considering when you thought of who would make the right partner for that?
Yeah, like how do you do a candidate search for like a metaverse? Yeah, it's a very niche and weird one. I think that we were already working with Decentraland before, so we've been the on-ramp for Decentraland for well over a year now. And I was speaking with some of the team there, and I think they just recommended Sean and the team, and we kind of got in touch. And we're like, hey, we're thinking of doing this metaverse ATM. What do you think? And they were up for it. And I don't know. We just kind of. I don't think anything has been done like this before. So that's just something you have to be comfortable with. Is just kind of. I think it is the Wild West. So I think reputation is everything, and relationships is everything, and the relationship was good, and we just said, let's do this together, and we kind of signed and started building. So
yeah. So if you're listening and and your skills are around relationship building, networking, communication, like there's definitely a place for you too, because so much of it is based on reputation and relationships. And I've talked to Luca a couple of times, and Luca's a really great listener and a really great conversationalist. So it's like the kind of person that I know that I can say something to, and he understands it. And same with the rest of the Metaverse Architects team. And I think like those skills are not to be overlooked, like the ability to understand people deeply and then kind of iterate based on what they tell you. Like that's a skill set in and of itself. And it's really important. And I mean, Sammy, just practically speaking, like, did you look at portfolios? Like, does such a thing exist? And maybe the Metaverse team can chime in, Metaverse Architects team can chime in too. Like, are developers out here like making portfolios of projects that they've worked on in order to kind of be seen, be visible, or is it purely reputation based?
I mean, when we started speaking with Metaverse Architects, it was really like right at the start of all of this stuff. Like not a lot of stuff had been done. So I think Sean, you can say more detail here. But by the time we spoke with Sean, like they hadn't done a lot of stuff. They had some big projects like upcoming, which I think a lot of which are like kind of done now. But no one really had, right? Like no one had really done anything. So it was kind of, there was a lot of trust involved, I would say. But Sean, maybe do you want to talk about like what you guys had done?
No, you hit it perfectly. Like Luca we had worked on some big projects before, but what was interesting about this one was no one was certain if it was possible or not yet. We weren't certain if this could be done. In fact, we took a long time going back and forth at the beginning because we actually wanted to find out if this could be done or not and what the limitations would be. And then interestingly enough, there were limitations that we overlooked after we decided, yes, this could be done, we could do it. And then suddenly, crap, we didn't consider what would happen, for example, if there's keyloggers involved, or how we're going to deal with KYC, or how we're going to protect people's information. More problems started coming up, and in truth, they were coming up because we're solving a problem that never had really been solved before. So then we're in the situation where it constantly going through that. With regards to portfolios, Mike can definitely give a good rundown of how things have changed since we started with Transak. But Sammy is right at that start, like we're going through, our portfolio was sparse compared to what it was now because things were still kicking off.
Okay, so I have the ability to go over, I think our panelists can go over a couple of minutes, but for those who are wrapping up and moving on, please drop your opinion about today's conversation in the chat. What did you think of it? Was it interesting? Did it make you excited? Or did you find it to be kind of more of a general session? And if so, tell us what you want us to go deeper on next time. What's more specific information you're looking for. So interesting, got to learn, excited about the future, or just a general session and you want to know more about a specific topic. Please feel free to drop those in the chat. And I'll let Michael talk about the portfolio, and then I have one more specific question. All right, Michael, go ahead.
So firstly, I'd like to mention something which you touched upon before for people who want to enter the space. After reading the docs and seeing YouTube, if you feel that you have a business concept, come speak to us. We offer free consultations. We can walk you through it, obviously on the premise that the Transak ATM is in your build. That I think is important to note. So we're here to help. Secondly, it's very interesting. When I joined in January, the guys, they were telling me about random names or random crypto clients. I just couldn't get my head around it. And then suddenly we had an influx of American entities for the first month. And then just a number of industries started entering the space. So I've had calls from people who own banks, people who own funds, people who are in the health space, casino, etc. So now it's becoming more institutional. And I think over the past 2 or 3 months, which is the most interesting, for me, it's the asset managers who have entered the space. And once the big institutions, the guys who have been managing billions of dollars for the past 100 years get into the space, it means that there are whispers and there's belief in the actual technology and ecosystem, in my opinion.
I love that. Now, does a physical real estate portfolio have any influence in the metaverse? Like, can you come to the Metaverse Architects team and be like, look, I developed all of these physical properties? Will they say, cool, those are translatable skills? Or do they say, I mean, obviously they trusted you and they invited you on, but how much clout does that give you in the metaverse?
If they replicate their actual assets virtually, is that what you're trying to say?
Just like if you have experience as a physical land developer or real estate developer,
yes.
Does that portfolio mean anything in the metaverse? Does that demonstrate transferable skills, and do people see that as valuable?
I mean, I would say yes, as in if you come to that stage that you're developing real estate physically, then you have the same skills as I mentioned in the beginning to take the virtual business real estate by storm. Then the use case can differ, right? If you own a hotel, then you'll have to think about potentially virtual hotel room NFTs. So then you can go to different use cases, but that's where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Luca said before the call started, there are so many advantages to developing real estate digitally, because when the pipes break, you don't have real life tenants who are affected necessarily by those conditions. And it's just easier and less costly sometimes to fix those kinds of problems that come with being a commercial.
The sleepless nights sometimes remains the same.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I had one specific question actually about billing and deliverables, and then I see some audience Q&A coming in. So for those who are listening, we'll wrap up with audience Q&A, hopefully kind of getting off the call in the next 10 minutes or so. I'm not in a rush. I don't think our panelists are in a rush, but we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we'll probably finish up in the next 10 minutes. And if you have to jump off now, we're so glad that we had you. And we're just really appreciative of your time. And please join us next week on August 2nd to witness the first Metaverse ATM. Okay. So as Sean was talking about scope, the expanded scope, and Sammy probably has some things to say about this too. Like, as you guys were deciding to build this ATM and you said, yeah, we can do that. And then you got into the project and you realized there were so many unknowns that you hadn't originally factored in. How do you actually like pitch and make proposals based on an unknown scope? And how does somebody conceptualize how to bill for that, right? Like based on completely unknown deliverables.
I can maybe jump in over here. It's difficult because nowadays, so today we find ourselves in a position where I would say 90% of the things that come to our table, we know exactly how they need to be done, because it also is, we're limited on two fronts. There's the experience front with regards to building things that haven't been done before. And that I think is what was most exciting about this project as well, that we, as a group of people, we just love tackling projects that haven't been done yet. This is why we built the largest tower in the metaverse, what we did in Fashion Street, the algorithms we created for Wayrest, which is a dungeon generation system. And hopefully if you come to the event next week as well, you see what we have in store with our new physics engine in Decentraland as well. However, you're also limited by the actual SDK of the metaverse using as well. So our hands aren't just tied by we're not just limited by the experience we would have as a team, but also the tools that are given to you by Decentraland and the limitations they impose on you in that regard. Now, actually being able to go to a proposal for something that you're not sure how it's going to pan out, ideally you always go as prepared as possible before you're closing a contract, because you want to be as clear on what those deliverables are going to be and how much time you're going to be spending, both for the expectations of your client, but also for yourself, to ensure that you're not doing 3 times or 4 times the amount of work that you initially thought you'd be doing and billing a fourth of your actual time.
Yeah, because you have to think about your own sustainability as an entrepreneur.
Definitely, and I'm certain Luca can really jump into this as well. But from the tech side, sometimes it's difficult, but then you also have moments where unprecedented problems are almost always going to come to your table, and that's also a learning opportunity, or an opportunity to deal with problems that are completely new, and they are new because you're tackling a problem you've never really dealt with before. And in the process of doing that and actually being hard-headed enough to solve it and talking to anyone you can, if you seemingly can't find the answer, you end up just raising the bar with regards to what problems you can solve in the future, if that makes sense, and what new solutions you can bring to the table. So I never really like to shy away from anything that people say is impossible. It's usually just transcends a new threshold or a convention that we didn't think possible.
But even like practically speaking, do you bill for your time? Do you bill for the outcome? Like, just, or maybe just kind of give people ways to think about how they would even start if they wanted to get into, say, becoming a metaverse developer or architect.
I would say it's usually the outcome on our end. So we work on a project basis, but then you need to be smart with regards to how much R&D there is involved. If there's something that you're not really sure how it's going to pan out, don't try and avoid, like, don't close a contract on it. Basically start planning out all the logic with regards to how it's going to work. This is more prevalent in the field of code, obviously, and actually trying to see how you're going to manipulate in the Decentraland's case, the Unity renderer to work in your favor, and actually seeing what can actually work. Yeah. One interesting point for this, Megan, is for architecture instead. So what happens if you, which happens to us as well, you assume that the design process is going to take an X amount of time, but then the client tends to have a certain vision with regards to where they creatively and thematically want to take the build. And therefore that gives you a lot of delays, not just with regards to what you want to build for them, but more often than not, what a client recommends can't always work with the limitations we have in the central. Like they'll be expecting something very high poly and we can only push something with low poly. Or we can't manipulate light in the central end, which means certain colors and textures change color with the time of day, which ends up influencing the look of the build. Those are also little hiccups that you end up having throughout the process that you need to cater for.
Yeah, and again, that's where having, you know, somebody with maybe skills that an account manager would have, or, you know, a client liaison, having those kind of skills to navigate those conversations and manage expectations and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Those are really important skills to have too.
That's the most practical takeaway that we like to managing expectations and just knowing exactly what's going on. Communication.
Yeah. That, because like Sammy said, that trust is so important. Okay, so one question that we have from Geo is, does anyone know when Sandbox will be opening up and linking to land in Decentraland?
Linking to land in Decentraland is something that's being worked on by a grant at the moment, actually implementing IPSME for a first interoperable use case between two different metaverses. We do not know when it's being rolled out though, and we also don't know when Sandbox will be opening. At least I don't.
Okay, anyone else insider knowledge? Just kidding. Okay, cool. And we have one more question and it is, how do you start as an architect moving from designing real buildings to metaverse buildings? And we've definitely talked a lot about this, but maybe just answering that question directly, how do you start? And Sean, you answered this whenever you said go to Decentraland's docs. Luca, I maybe you can chime in. Like how
to start as a metaverse architect.
Yeah, like maybe take us to like that actual moment where you were like, I'm gonna do this, like the decision, the moment of the decision, and then the very first thing that you did.
Okay, so yeah, like the what put me over the edge was somebody telling me to just take inspired action, and this was something that I felt very inspired by. So I just started waking up every day and taking action on what my gut was telling me to do.
So do you remember what the first action was?
Yeah, like I went and checked the domains decentralandarchitect.com and metaversearchitect.com. They were still available in early 2021. So I registered them both and created two websites that were basically competing with each other for search results.
Wow.
So that's how I did. Of course, my background is sales and marketing, right? So I did study the docs because it's important, even if you're not a designer, to understand the docs, to understand what's actually being done. But my job initially was just connecting clients with 3D modelers and developers. So I started as kind of a middleman and then worked our way to building a network of developers and 3D modelers to then incorporating and employing them. So yeah, like I think in the sense that in a real world architect needs to brand himself and create a personal brand and create maybe a company name, is the same for this space, right? You need to brand yourself in the right way, market yourself in the right channels. I strongly believe that networking is probably one of the most powerful ways you can market yourself for free. Because I mean, going into Discord or hitting people up on LinkedIn or going to events or coming to something like this and asking questions and then, connecting with us on LinkedIn, it just allows you to develop the relationships you need to do more than what you are capable of alone.
On your own. Yeah.
And then just look at yourself, see what you're good at, what you're not good at, and try fill in the gaps.
And then as far as the actual design goes, like the design is the design. The design part translates almost exactly as it would in the real world. It's just that maybe the limitations are different and the constraints of the world are different. But as far as like I'm thinking of just like the design software that they use, like you can take those design renderings and give them to a developer, right? And have a developer kind of translate your designs in
the
digital
there
world.
Is that the skills are quite particular to the constraints of the SDK, and also in terms of 3D modeling, the
Yeah.
limitations for Decentraland. So the hardest part in the beginning was actually finding people who I could give work to, not actually finding the work, because there was still a very small, and there still is a very small amount of people who can actually do this kind of work. And that lack of kind of supply of services is what we came to fill.
Amazing. Well, folks, that is unfortunately the time we have. Sammy has to jump off. I know he's got a meeting coming up. So let's say goodbye to Sammy real quick, and then we'll wrap it up with everyone else. But thank you so much, Sammy, for coming.
Yeah, thank you. This was super, super interesting. And yeah, I feel like we're talking about stuff that's going to be like, we're going to look back on this conversation in like a few years and be like, wow.
I love it. I agree.
It's history being made. Okay. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks.
Bye, Sammy. And to everyone else who's still with us, please make sure to join us on August 2nd. The link is, the Eventbrite link is in the chat. Luca here will be walking you through how to access the world's first Metaverse ETM in Decentraland. And there will be a special surprise inside Decentraland involving childhood fantasies and tech and not flamethrowers. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say, but let's just say that you will definitely get to experience the lifting of real world constraints and physics the rules of physics will not apply. Oh my gosh, Marina guessed hoverboards. We cannot confirm or deny.
I mean, if people made it till this long into the talk, maybe they deserve to hear that, right?
Yes. All right. Well, Luca, do you want to reveal it then?
Yes, no, I don't know. Maybe there's been some hits in the chat. What I was going to actually maybe finish off with or mention is like the first time I entered Decentraland, the world was a desert. You know what I mean? It was completely devoid of user-generated content. It had just launched, essentially.
Wow.
So many people, when it was launched, what their comments were was like, what on earth am I going to do in this empty space? But to me, I saw a blank canvas and a wealth of opportunity. So we're still in the early days, I believe, of applying metaverse technology to business. So it's bound to be quite clunky and glitchy. But what we know for certain is that by applying this technology in creative ways, we're going to be doing business in an innovative way as well. And as Sammy touched on, I personally agree with him that, in my opinion, what we're doing here is going to be put down in the history books as an example of how the metaverse functions.
Amazing.
And in some cases, we'll be extremely wildly wrong. And in some cases, I think we'll be surprised by just how right.
Amazing. I love that. Well, I hope everyone took notes so that in 10 years we can look back on this conversation and check on our predictions. Thank you again so much for your attention, for your time. We are so happy to have you, and we look forward to seeing everybody on August 2nd in Decentraland. All right. Thank you again to our wonderful panelists. A round of applause for everyone, and we hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Sean.